friends, it's Valerie. Welcome back to another week's What's for Dinner. If you're new here, welcome. I would love if you would hit that subscribe button and join my YouTube family. I put out What's for Dinner videos every Sunday, and I've got 3 inspirational meals for you again this week, and I hope that you enjoy them. Other than that, I hope everybody had a great holiday season, a Merry Christmas, or whatever other holidays you do or do not celebrate. I just hope that you're having a good time of year, and let's just get to it. This first meal is a ground turkey, zucchini, and sweet potato skillet. I'm starting off by placing a tablespoon of olive oil in a skillet over medium-high heat, and I'm going to go ahead and add in my 1 pound of ground turkey. You could use ground beef like the recipe calls for. I'm just substituting turkey because that's what I try to normally do, and I really felt like it complemented this type of meal really well. And now I'm using my meat chopping tool to just break that up and let that begin to cook a little bit more. And then I'm going to go ahead and add in some garlic. I believe it calls for 1 clove of garlic, but I probably added at least 3 because I really love garlic. And I'm going to continue to break that meat up now that it is starting to cook a little bit more and get that garlic all nice and spread out in the meat. And while that ground turkey is cooking up, I'm going to go ahead and start cutting up my onions, dicing up about a 1/2 cup of onion and about a 1/2 cup of red bell peppers. I might have a little bit extra of the onion because I just used 1 small onion here. And now that my ground turkey is cooked through and no longer pink, I am just removing it from that skillet and placing it in a bowl to the side because now we're going to use this same pan to cook up the rest of the ingredients. And I have this spot in the middle of my pan that kind of got some bits stuck to it, so I'm just using a little bit of water really quick just to kind of break that up, and so I don't continue to have too much burning in the same spot. And then I'm going to add my diced up onions and bell peppers to the skillet and let those go ahead and start to cook and saute for about 3 to 4 minutes. And if you think it needs a little bit of oil, just go ahead and add a little bit of oil. I didn't catch me adding in the diced sweet potato because apparently I missed the whole clip of cutting it up and adding it in for you guys, but it calls for 2.5 cups of diced sweet potatoes, so I added those in, as well as a 1/4 cup of beef broth or water, and I'm using beef broth here. And I'm just kind of mixing that all together, and I'm going to place the lid on my skillet, and you're going to let those cook for about 5 to 6 minutes until they're getting soft, and the steam from having the lid on will help them cook and get softer. And now I am just taking 2 zucchinis and I'm cutting them in half lengthwise and then in half again, and just cutting those into some smaller bite-sized pieces. Now that those sweet potatoes have softened, I'm going to go ahead and add in those diced zucchinis, and you're going to go ahead and let those cook for another 3 minutes. I also added a little bit more water. I have this issue, I don't know if it's that I'm using too much heat, but I have that spot in the middle of my pan there that is kind of burning up. Yeah, I don't know. If you guys know anything about that, or it could be my stove. It gets really hot in the center compared to the whole pan, but it's very frustrating. Anyways, so now I'm gonna go ahead and add after that few minutes have gone by, I'm going to go ahead and add in that cooked up ground turkey back in and let that begin to warm up again. And then I'm going to go ahead and add in 1 teaspoon of Dijon mustard, as well as a 1/3 cup of tomato sauce. and a half a teaspoon of dried oregano, as well as a 1/8 teaspoon of crushed red pepper. And you can also put as much salt and pepper as you would like at this point. I kind of stirred it around. I think I gave it a taste, and I don't think I added any salt, but I did add some ground black pepper to it. And here is that all done. This was really tasty. I like this a lot. In fact, I think it'd be a really good like meal prep item. I loved that there was veggies and the ground turkey. It just had like a nice protein with all those veggies. I love vegetables. And I think ground turkey actually complemented this very well. So yeah, I served this with some brown rice, and I had this like leftover like sandwich roll. So I made just little rounds of garlic toast to use up that bread really quick. But we love this meal. This next meal is a pizza pasta casserole. The recipe calls for half of a green bell pepper and 1 small onion chopped. So I'm just using this little chopping tool here to go ahead and chop up that bell pepper and onion. The recipe says to start off by cooking your pasta and then moving on to your ground beef mixture, but I'm actually prefer to wait a while on the pasta until like part of the way through, because I don't want my pasta just sitting there getting cold and kind of stuck to each other. So I'm gonna get started on the ground beef mixture first. So to my large skillet over medium heat, I'm just going to go ahead and add in my 1 pound of ground beef, and I'm not using the sausage in this recipe, so I'm just using 1 pound of ground beef, and I am going to go ahead and just season that with, I believe, just some garlic powder, oregano, and some Italian seasoning. And the recipe doesn't even call for seasoning the meat like this. I just thought it would add some nice additional flavor, which I like, so I just went ahead and did that, and I'm using my meat chopping tool to break that up. And next, the recipe actually says once the meat was cooked to add it to a mixing bowl with your onions and the bell peppers and then the canned like mushrooms and all the other ingredients like that. I chose to put them in the pan like this because I just wanted them to be cooked up and nice and soft right now. So I just chose to saute them with the rest of the meat while it was cooking, and I added in the garlic. It calls for 2 cloves, but I definitely used more, about 3 or 4, because let's be real, I love garlic. And I'm just mixing that garlic in, and then I'm gonna go ahead and add in my sliced up mushrooms. I'm not using canned mushrooms like they wanted in the recipe. I just don't prefer those over fresh. So I'm using a package, I believe this is like 8 to 10 ounce package of baby Bella mushrooms, and I'm just stirring those in, and I'm gonna let those cook until they're all soft, and the onions are all soft, and the peppers. And then I'm going to go ahead and add in my sliced olives. It calls for 1 small can. I had whole olives and I just sliced them up, and I used the amount that just looked right for what I would like. Then I'm using this Prego Chunky Garden Sauce, and it's a 24-ounce jar of sauce, and I'm going to go ahead and add that in, use a little water to get out the remaining sauce, and I'm going to go ahead and just stir that all together and get that meat mixture nice and coated. And then I'm going to go ahead and just let that simmer for a couple minutes while I step aside and get started on my pasta. So for that, I just went ahead and boiled a large pot of salted water, and I'm adding in 4 cups of dry pasta. It calls for penne. I'm using rotini pasta, and just cook that till al dente. And now it calls for some Parmesan. This is a Parmesan blend, and I'm going to go ahead and add that in. I believe it calls for half a cup of Parmesan cheese. I'm just kind of like eyeing it and putting it in. These are shaved Parmesan as well, and I'm just going to stir that around and let it begin to melt. And then I'm going to go ahead and add in my pepperonis. It called for 4 ounces of pepperoni. I believe this is a little bit larger of a bag. This is from Aldi, and I'm just kind of just eyeing what I think looks good for me. And I am separating them though, because I don't want them to clump up into like one ball of pepperoni, and if you add them in just solid chunks, they're just going to stay that way. They're not going to be able to separate very well. So I'm doing that really quick, and then just stirring them in. And once my pasta is ready, I'm just going to drain it and then add it right on into that sauce mixture and get it all nice and coated with all those toppings and sauce. At this point, it's looking really good to me, and let me tell you, this did turn out amazing. Now I'm just taking my 9x13 baking dish, and I'm going to pour all of that mixture right on into it and kind of just spread it out. And then I'm going to go ahead and top it with 1 to 2 cups of mozzarella cheese. And I'm pretty sure I used close to 2 cups because I love cheese and it looked like a good amount to cover the whole top. And once I covered it with all the cheese, I went ahead and sprinkled it with a little bit of Italian seasoning just for a look on the top. I always like the way that looks. And the recipe doesn't call for this, but I did save a few of those pepperonis to add on top, but I'm not going to add them yet. I'm actually going to start to bake this a little bit first because I don't want my pepperonis to burn on top. So yeah, I baked it for maybe, the total recipe time is 25 to 30 minutes. So I probably left this in there for 10 minutes to start off with at 350 degrees, and then I pulled it out and I placed pepperonis on top. I just really liked the idea of how it would look like an actual pizza, and not only just for like photo purposes for you guys and to make it look more appealing than just cheese all on top, it actually just adds some more pepperoni, and I love pepperoni, so that was really tasty to me. And yeah, the OCD in me had to fix that first row. It just needed 4 pepperonis to match the rest. But once I stuck it back in the oven for the remainder of the time, and this is what it looks like after, nice and cheesy and bubbly. If you don't mind your pepperonis cooked the whole time, you can go ahead and do that as well. I just didn't want them to burn. And I plated this again with some more of those cheesy toast rounds because I needed to use up more of that bread that I needed to just use up before it went bad, and it was tasty. I've been really addicted to those little cheese bread rounds, and we loved this meal. Like, my boyfriend couldn't get enough of it. It was really tasty. It was really pizza in a pasta dish. I loved all the toppings, so I hope you like this. This last meal is a sheet pan Italian chicken, green beans, and potatoes. Okay, so I'm following a recipe on just basically using the temp and time kind of thing for it, and I'm kind of making it my own because it doesn't call for seasoning the chicken. So I have 3 chicken breasts here. It says to cut them in quarters, and I'm just using my chicken breast whole, and I am just using thin chicken breasts, and I'm seasoning them with some garlic powder, some Badia Complete, and some garlic herb seasoning from McCormick. And then I also even used some zesty Italian dressing like the LiQWYD, and I poured some on top. And I'm now using that package of zesty, the dry zesty Italian dressing mix, and I poured that in. I used most of the packet. I'm gonna use the remainder, like half or quarter to a half's worth later on, so save a little bit of that. And I decided it still needed some more something to it, so I added some more onion powder now and even more of that zesty liquid Italian dressing, and I just mix that up, and I'm going to set that aside to kind of marinate while I'm working on the vegetables. So now I'm taking some potatoes. I'm just using russet potatoes here because it's what I had and I needed to use up. But red potatoes, or like, actually I would have loved like yellow, like the golden Yukon type potatoes. Those are my favorite, and they would have been really nice with this. But yeah, I just had these potatoes, so I'm cutting them into some small pieces. Actually, I should have cut them a little smaller than even this because they were still left a little harder in the end, and I had to remove my chicken at the end for a little bit and put them back in the oven so my chicken wouldn't overcook, but so the potatoes would get softer to my liking. The recipe I'm following also calls for 2 cans of green beans. I'm using 1 pound of fresh green beans, and I'm just trimming off my ends of those green beans. And yeah, I just prefer, I had them on hand, but I do prefer fresh green beans. I really love them a lot. I'll eat any green beans, really. I love vegetables in general, but yeah, I've been really into asparagus and green beans recently. Like, yeah, so just cleaning those up and do whatever, snap them off, cut them off. I normally snap them off, but I always see people cutting them off. I thought I'd try it. I liked it. So now I just have them in a bowl with some olive oil, some garlic powder, and some of that zesty Italian seasoning. And this is just a salt and pepper combo. I even used some of Badia Complete in there, and I'm just going to go ahead and toss those in all that oil and seasoning and dressing to get them all nice and coated. And I'm going to do basically the same thing with the potato, add some of that liquid Italian dressing, and I am using the zesty variation. I just like the flavor from that, and some garlic powder. And you can add whatever seasonings you think you have that would go really well with this. I love that McCormick garlic and herb seasoning. That's like one of my favorites. So I have several of those always on hand, and I add it to everything because I just love garlic flavors. I want all the fresh garlic, all the herbs and flavors of garlic. Like, yeah. So now I'm taking a large baking sheet that I covered with foil, and I'm on 1/3 of it, I'm adding those cut up potatoes, and then I'm gonna go ahead and add my chicken breasts. And you do want to make sure you don't have chicken breasts that are too thick here. So these are they're thin, they're on the thinner side, and if you need to cut them to make them cut like more of the cutlet style, or just pound them a little bit thinner. And I'm just taking the remainder of that dressing that is in or marinade in the bowl, and I'm pouring it on top because I want to make sure that my chicken has lots of flavor. I don't want it to be very bland. And now I'm placing those green beans on the other third of the pan. And you are just going to take some foil and cover this whole sheet pan up. And I made a mistake and I forgot the butter at this point. I did want to add butter, and actually I'm forgetting to tell you here, I'm also pouring the remainder of that half packet of zesty Italian powdered seasoning over the top of everything. And I would have poured butter at this point, like about half a stick to a stick of melted butter. But I completely forgot, and so I had to pull it out of the oven. Like, I remembered while it was already baking, so I had to pull it out, and you'll see me do that. So yeah, you're gonna bake this at 350 degrees for 1 hour, and here you'll see me pulling it out when I realize, and pouring that melted butter. And of course it would have been so much better to have remembered in the beginning, because that's what's really going to give your potatoes like, they're going to soak that up, as well as the chicken. It's going to keep it very moist because of the fat content in the butter. But it is what it is. I've made the mistake. It still worked out in the end. It was still flavorful. Of course, it just would have been better the other way, and not forgetting. But this was really tasty. I really enjoyed those potatoes with that, like, zesty Italian seasoning on them. I've had vegetables like that, like green beans, before, but my potatoes like soaked that up, and they were really tasty, and so was the chicken. Yeah, so I hope you guys enjoy this meal. Thanks so much for watching, friends. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any future What's for Dinner videos, and I hope you all have an amazing week.